Ja, goedemorgen collega's. Dan kunnen we verder gaan met onze hoorzitting. Today we have two English-speaking members here of the European Commission are hearing about supporting teacher and school leader careers. We are very pleased to have you with us here. We have Dr. Hannah Grainer-Clemson. I've got a short summary from the secretary, which I will read. Dr. Hannah Grainer-Clemson is a schools policy officer for the European Commission. Her responsibilities include coordinating the ET 2020 working group schools, developing the European online platform School Education Gateway and the Teacher Academy, and work on competence-based learning and transversal skills. She has worked as a teacher in secondary schools in the UK, as a university tutor for teacher education, and as a researcher, primarily in the field of arts and cultural education. She has also worked on a number of projects concerning the use of multimedia in education and community practice, and has published journal articles on the development of cultural identity. We also have Michael Teutsch with us. He's in fact a German, but he will give his presentation in English. Michael Teutsch is head of the unit Schools and Multilingualism in the European Commission's Directorate General for Education, Youth, Sport and Culture. The unit is a policy and program unit dealing with policy cooperation in the areas of schools and multilingualism on topics such as key competences, early school leaving, language learning, early childhood education and care, or teachers' professional development, with the European flagship program Erasmus in the areas of schools, vocational education and training, and adult learning, and the management and further development of digital education platforms. There is a simultaneous translation, and you will be able to ask questions in Dutch, so there will be no problem. Dr. Hannah Grainer-Clemson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm actually going to hand over to Michael Teutsch to begin the presentation.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation, for having us here. It's a great opportunity to show some of our work and also to discuss with you how the European Union can support the Flemish community in developing its policies. And this is sort of what I wanted to do at this very, very briefly at the start, before we go into the detailed matter of teachers and teacher shortages, to just say 2 or 3 words on how the EU works with member states and how we try to support you in the policy development. I mean, our basic idea, what we want to do in Europe, is to develop something we call, and heads of state have called, a European education area. So a space in Europe which basically has 2 main elements. The one is sort of ensure mobility. So we find it extremely important that learners, teachers, staff can move freely in Europe, so that someone from Flanders can go to any country in Europe without any problem if he or she would like to do that, either a learner or a teacher or any other staff. And then we have to work to make it possible with our programs, and also work on obstacles for mobility like recognition issues on languages. The second idea is about this European education area, that there's an idea to have not just any type of education in Europe, but we want to achieve quality education. We want to have innovative education, we want to have inclusive education wherever we are in Europe. That is, of course, decided here by yourselves. It's decided in all other member states. But the idea is, what ministers have discussed, we want to support each other in order to make our national decisions. So we want to exchange good practices, we want to learn from each other, so that when we take our decisions back at home, we are inspired, if we want, on what others are doing. So that's basically the 2 ideas we are working on. Make mobility sure, but also support each other in order to get quality done. And the different strands we are doing is indeed through policy cooperation on the one hand, and the programs that we have on the other hand. What we're going to hear today is one of the results of the policy cooperation on the particular topic of teachers. We're going to present you, or Hannah will, what the results of this work. What's the background of this? There was the ministers of education in the EU have a few years ago defined topics that are of an interest in several countries. So they simply said, here are topics that we work in Flanders, but it's the same topics I also worked on in Portugal, in Poland, or wherever you go in Europe. And once they have identified these topics of a common interest, they've given a mandate to experts to do further work on it. Yeah? So they have basically asked a technical working group, which is colleagues from the ministries, but also from cities and stakeholders, to work on particular topics. And one of the topics we looked at in the school area was the issue of teacher career. It does peer learning of countries. We identify good practices. And if everything goes well, I mean, we also get some results which says, okay, based on all the peer learning done, this is ideas on how the policy can be done in a particular area based on the exchanges we have. Yeah? And what happens then, why we do the exchanges, of course, our hope is that this is then useful for when the member states go back home and decide on their policies. We have quite some examples where this has been taken into account in national legislation, of course, then adapted to the national circumstances. But we're quite happy to hear that a number of countries have repeatedly told us when they had national legislation, it was helpful for them and inspiring to see what has worked out of this group. And we have either it comes at the technical level, or for some other issues, the ministers themselves have then decided, based on our cooperation, we think these are some European principles on how policies could look like in a way, like quality principles on early childhood education, quality principles on key competence development, on language learning. So that's basically what we're going to hear today. We're very, very grateful indeed for the Flemish community to always having been very active in the cooperation and in these exchanges, and we hope it will be useful for your own legislative decisions. This is the policy cooperation. I would just like to mention very briefly that the other big tool we have is the Erasmus program that you all know. Erasmus is very well known for the exchanges between learners and staff. It's very important. It's not only a higher education program. It started with higher education 30 years ago, but today it's really a lifelong learning program starting from early childhood education, staff exchanges, to schools, to vocational training, higher education and adult learners. So there we have on the one hand also mobility of learners and mobility of staff in Europe that is possible, and the Flemish community is also very active there. And with Erasmus we also fund projects so that, for example, a teacher education institution from Ghent or whatever can have partnership with a teacher education institution from Hamburg in Germany or from Warsaw in Poland to develop certain projects together. So we have some projects that develop this cooperation, in which we also hope that it will be useful for national policy development. This is what I wanted to say, just to give you sort of a general framework, how we work with countries, how we try to support you, and what is a bit the background and the mandate that we had to work on the issue of teachers. And I stop here because Hannah knows everything much better than I do on teacher careers. Thank you for.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you. Yes, so I am here in my capacity as the Working Group Schools Coordinator, and I've had the honour of helping to lead that peer learning process. So, as my colleague said, it is the ambition of the European education area to support innovative and inclusive education, and what we're talking about when we talk about that is about supporting outward-looking schools and teachers across Europe, and of course by doing so giving all pupils an opportunity to have meaningful learning experiences. So, linked to, of course, our focus topic, having enough passionate, and by that we mean positive, engaged, ambitious, and highly competent teachers and school leaders, inspiring all learners to reach their full potential is crucial. And of course, the having enough is not enough. Of course, the important bit is that they are passionate and highly competent, that it's not just about numbers, but it's about how those individuals feel about the work that they are doing, about their desire to progress. Now, supporting teachers and school leaders is not by any means a new topic for the European Commission, and it's certainly not a new topic for member states. We've been working through this tool of working groups of peer learning for over 10 years in particular, and here you can see that we have a legacy, that the work that we're doing today, that we've been doing over the past 18 months, has really come after a series of working groups, of reports, of investigations, of explorations, of sharing of practice. We started in 2010 focusing on supporting teacher educators in particular, supporting teacher competence development. Building on that, and this is where the important idea of career comes in, is that we're looking at a career-long perspective on teaching, and that report, which was published, the work that was published in 2015, is built around this idea of moving from initial teacher education through an induction phase and then through career-long continued professional development. We then, in 2016, broadened our focus, and we realised that although looking in detail at specific areas is highly useful, we needed to look at the system as a whole, and that's going to be an idea that you'll see coming through the work that we've done recently. So the 2018 report, European Ideas for Better Learning, covers 4 different topics, of which one is about teachers and school leaders, but brings all of that together with other ideas and key messages on quality assurance, on a sense of continuity and transition right from, as well as key stakeholder organisations, is, from my perspective, has been the ideal way to really look at this topic of teacher and school leader careers. And we also have been looking in a parallel track on quality assurance, as you can see here. What has been really beneficial, I think, is that it may take a number of years for you to truly see results. They understand the policy making process, they're dealing with that, they're looking at ways in which they can make changes to what they already have and develop those ideas. We also have experts, and as you can see here on the timeline, we've had, or we will have, 7 meetings over the course of the 2 years, but we've also had these events, thematic seminars, where we've had between 5 or 6 working group members who have then invited 10 or 15 experts, school heads, researchers, representatives of inspectorates and so on, to provide their insights, and then we've brought that into the working group and learned from that. And then peer learning activities, or PLAs, which have been more week-long activities in host countries, where we've been able to really go in detail, and about 10 members of the working group would come and bring someone else from their country to work with them on this topic. What I'm delighted to say is that Flanders has been representative at all of these, and really our working group member, Lisbeth Hen, has been so involved, so supportive, and very much a part of the work we've been doing, even hosting, along with Eurocities in Antwerp, the peer learning activity in 2019 on leadership. So we're very, very grateful to her input on that. You'll see then that we're working towards, right now, these final outputs, which I am going to give you an exclusive presentation on. The work, the full final draft was finished yesterday. Strictly speaking, it was finished last night, quite late last night. So you really are the first people to get a presentation on this work. So we'll see how it goes, and I hope it is very much useful to you. And so too, the key messages and what is coming out from that work. It was important for us to identify the challenges. It may seem as if they are obvious, were obvious, but we wanted to take time to really think about them, to think about what are the things that policymakers really could act on. And there are three ideas here, and a way of grouping together or understanding the challenges, and that's to think about what impacts on recruitment. And by recruitment, we're talking about bringing in new teachers and school leaders to the school education profession. And with that, that's the idea of what is attractive about those careers, looking at it perhaps more from the outside. About what impacts on retention. And here we're talking about keeping those teachers and school leaders doing the work that they are doing, and especially early career teachers. And we know that in Flanders and in other countries, there is a concern about teachers leaving within the first few years of their career, but their career is very short because they are leaving quite soon after their initial teacher education. And a third word or idea there is regeneration. And that's the idea that we're wanting or hoping that these individual teachers and school leaders will develop themselves, that they don't just come into school education and are the same person or teaching the same way or having the same leadership approach year on year. And then also in terms of regeneration, how they are supporting their peers, how they are looking after young entrants to the profession, how they are sharing practice themselves. This is a classic, agreed key challenge. That teacher careers, that a career in school education is a flat or one-dimensional, long, winding path with no or few opportunities to explore different ways of working, contexts, with little signposting of where to go next. And it is this particular perception of the profession that we've talked about, and we've looked at ways to address the challenges associated with. And here we're talking about particular challenges concerning motivation. And our motivation can be, of course, intrinsic, so what you yourself are motivated by, or extrinsic, so there could be ideas of being valued or a sense of reward for what you are doing that could be motivating. The challenge is, of course, that is going to be different for every individual. And so it's very, in terms of a policy challenge, how to create action, how to take an approach that works for all teachers and school leaders if something so fundamental is actually is caught up in how you individually feel. The word talent is put there alongside competence. Competence frameworks are very well known in teacher education, in teacher professional development. But there's an idea here, or a challenge here, again linked to motivation, about how to value the special talents and individual talents that teachers and school leaders have, as well as the competences being those things that you expect of all teachers and school leaders across the profession. Linked to coming particularly out of this idea of challenging the perception of a long, single, flat road or path is the challenge of creating diverse opportunities. As I mentioned, in terms of regeneration, building a sense of professional identity, the challenge of how to encourage teachers to develop themselves, to feel that they are a profession, that they are a professional community, and that they actually want to share their practice and develop themselves and each other. And then finally, this is something that we've heard a lot, but a lot of our ideas in the working group are based on is about the challenge of making the support that exists coherent. That many countries, and I would say Flanders included, have done an awful lot and have a huge amount in terms of support already for teachers and school leaders. But it's about making sense of that for the system, for the schools, for the individuals, and ways in which those can actually be tied together and linked together better to show that this long, flat, single path is not the only way of seeing the profession. So, what I will share now is the working group ideas on how to have visible and diverse opportunities and how to... This idea is not just exclusive to the school education profession. The idea that career progression is based on motivation, ability and opportunity is absolutely central to the work that we've been doing. And if I explain a little bit what this means, all three are necessary. So if you think about motivation, if you want to progress, you need to be motivated. If you want to have a sense that you've achieved, then of course part of that is going to be developing competence or ability. So you need to be motivated in order to work on your competence, in order to develop. Now, that's all well and good, but if you don't have the opportunities, this could be professional development courses, this could be given a new role, given new responsibilities, then we find that those abilities are still quite static, that they're not going to develop. So all three need to work together. And also, we're finding that sometimes teachers, particularly school leaders, are sometimes found in a new opportunity. They are suddenly in charge of something. They are suddenly in a new position. And they realise that they suddenly need new abilities, new competences in order to deal with those situations. So this dynamic view of progression is very important. And here is how we see it in terms of teachers and school leaders. Now, this is an example from the Netherlands of a newly developed idea or framework to understand how teachers and school leaders can develop and progress in different ways at any one time. So, for example, a teacher might be working on their practice in the classroom, but they might also at the same time be improving their mentoring skills by working with new teachers who have come to their school, for example. Or they may be a more experienced teacher who is perhaps more interested in research and engaging with policy design. So the inner circle there, we're thinking always about having an impact on the learning of pupils, but then you are progressing from student to novice to experience to a sense of being an expert teacher or school leader along your career. I also wanted to say that this was actually shared by the Netherlands representative of the working group, who is himself a professor at the University of Amsterdam, and he is one of the, I think he is one of the few, I think there are 2 or 3 representatives of the working group who represent the ministry, but they are in fact employed by universities. So that's quite an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting perspective for us to have in terms of our work. How the working group understand career paths differently. This is something that we will be talking about a lot, that we will be sharing a lot, that we will be presenting a lot in the coming months. This is a crucial way in which we see to get away from that single track pathway. Of course, of course, moving upwards, for example, from teacher to school leader to school head, is and will continue to be an important and attractive, for some, career path. But of course, there are, as shown by this slide, other ways of seeing this. Moving up and along, that's the idea of becoming more expert, perhaps of maybe developing particularly an area of your classroom practice, of particularly working on leadership skills. Moving sideways, that might be, for example, within a school, one might be a classroom teacher and then might move into a slightly different role of being a special educational needs coordinator, for example. Changing context, it's possible to change the context in which you are a teacher or school leader, moving from primary to secondary perhaps, even moving from a rural school to a city school, for example. And those are perhaps the more obvious ones in terms of working in schools. We then talked about and shared examples of working at different layers of the system. And this is the idea that someone could work in a school environment, but might also be the coordinator of a regional network, might be a member of a European network, might also be involved with their ministry in terms of policy development and be an advisor, perhaps, as well as a school head. And then we have the moving in and out. This idea, of course, that teachers may come into the profession, as I did, not as their first career, that teachers and school leaders might move out of the school education context, might work in higher education, but they haven't, maybe to themselves, left education entirely. Or they may move out of education, school education, and then come back again. There's also consideration of new entrants, particularly with regards to school heads, and that is this idea of, or considering whether school heads can come from other professions and not necessarily having had an extensive teaching experience. I'm taking my time over this because these are fresh, new concepts. If there are any questions about these, of course, be happy to answer those. But I hope that's given you some idea of the way in which we're trying or have been trying to shift our own understanding, when I say that, I mean the working group members, the policy officers from the ministries, in order to already address these challenges. And I just want to conclude this first point by showing you something else that came out from this work on diversifying or having a sense of diverse paths within school education careers. And this was created by our representative of Finland, who took the work back to the ministry there, and then from that they created this beautiful, slightly complex mapping of all the different career possibilities in school education. And I think this for us made us realise that a first step might be just that simple mapping. What is possible? Where could teachers and school leaders go? And then from that, you can then start to identify support. You can make these opportunities more visible. You can start to show just what the exciting opportunities that are there, instead of, as we've seen before, that single, lonely, one-dimensional path. And so too, a way in which we could start to achieve coherence or take action in a way in which acknowledges that there is already a lot within school education systems that supports teachers and school leaders and careers. We're not saying that by any means that there's not enough, that there are not enough professional development opportunities. That is almost fake news. There's so much support out there. There's so much formal support out there. There's formal recognition, but there's also a huge amount of informal support and development happening around teacher and school leader careers. But in terms of managing that, in terms of mapping it, as Finland did, but also perhaps in terms of what a framework can do in terms of monitoring or steering, we see the benefits, or the working group have really seen the benefit in terms of bringing all of that together. So this is a key idea of the working group, to outline, this is as far as they've got, to outline a template for as a framework for teacher and school leader careers. And you'll see in this graphic on the slide that competences and existing competence frameworks might be included within that. But you can see that, as I said before, competences is just one part of understanding careers and supporting career progression. So we also have highlighted here the ways in which the elements that could be included in a framework, but also the ways in which it can function, that it can provide a shared language and vision in terms of what a national education system wants to achieve or provide in terms of supporting career progression. Really highlighting types of opportunities, looking again at its support structures and resources, making sure that that salary and working conditions work for everyone, considering ways of recognition and reward that can be highly motivating, that can provide perhaps other opportunities. And we recognise also that such a framework could also help link to other school education processes, such as quality assurance. I'm going to build this gradually because there are other parts to this graphic. So, we see that if the existing elements or even new elements were brought together under or within a framework for teacher and school leader careers, the working group see that this can directly support individual teachers and school leaders. It can help give that sense of the continuum of the career-long development through initial teacher education, through their induction phase, and right through their all of their experiences, professional development. That it can give them a sense of ownership and responsibility for that progression. And that links to this idea of career competence, that teachers and school leaders, and that's something that Ireland in particular have highlighted, that they are responsible for it isn't for teachers and school leaders to be directed the whole time, that they can take charge of their own careers. And that in itself can be highly motivating. That a framework can highlight ways of improving evaluation and feedback processes, of improving the kind of dialogue that happens in schools, the kind of self-reflection that happens to help a teacher realise where they're at, where they're going to, and to identify new opportunities. Now, of course, in terms of action that benefits the whole system, we also want to take into consideration how this can benefit schools. The idea that by having a shared language, a shared vision, by having this coherence, you can benefit school development. And this is a very important point that came out of the previous work, that supporting schools to develop is the best way of supporting the pupils, because they are the ones that know the pupils, that know the local community, that adapt their practices to the learners that they have. And within that support to schools, we're looking at, or we're proposing or encouraging that any personal development plans are linked to school development plans. And this is really important to help schools and teachers understand that they have needs, but that those can be somehow both catered for. That the leadership capacity to support the staff also may need to be further developed, further enabled in order to better do that. To have that coherence within the school is very important. And then, of course, to support the system. How can such a framework for teacher and school leader careers support the system? Again, it's very important to engage with stakeholders, and if this framework can give this shared understanding of career progression, of diverse paths, this can enable that kind of positive, forward-thinking dialogue to happen. It can also possibly help identify overlaps or gaps. If you already have a lot of support out there, perhaps by bringing it together, by mapping it, you can better understand how to perhaps be more efficient and effective with that support. Those are the big ideas. That's where I'm going to leave it in terms of the our vision for seeing career progression differently. Now I'm just going to build on that, to add on that by giving you a few country examples. Portugal. Portugal is a very interesting example in that what they are trying to do at the moment is that they are trying to better link professional development provision with their evaluation cycle and bring that together with this sense of career progression. So here, this is a graphic that was created by our Portuguese representatives. They wanted to particularly share with us, share with the group, how they work at a national level with training centres, with councils, with school management, with the ministry, to kind of oversee the way in which teachers and school leaders are evaluated and how their professional development plans are created. They wanted to show how at a more local level they have identified their key providers, their key actors, the municipalities, the educational organisations, schools networks and teacher educators. And then at the level of the teachers and school leaders, looking at how they interact. And they've also included researchers in that relationship, which I think is a very interesting point to take note of there. As I mentioned before, Ireland have also taken a look at how they have different levels of support, and that support really links for them the initial teacher education phase, the early career phase, which the word there means bridge, and the ongoing path, the ongoing career. So it's really thinking throughout the whole career and how national support services, regional training centres and school-based processes are working in a complementary way. In terms of framework, what they actually have is a quality framework for schools, and those are their expectations for the whole school, and that includes the leadership, the management, the learning that goes on, the environment. So they've brought it together in that respect, and from that they use that as a way to base their evaluation processes, to guide their inspectorate and so on. So that is the way it's been working in Ireland there, and I think this idea of the continuum of the career is something I think that resonates in Flanders as well. I also mentioned school heads. The working group recognised that if schools as learning organisations are crucial to a system-wide drive for high quality, then school heads, of course, play a critical role, inspiring, leading and developing their entire community and acting as a link between that community and the rest of the system and its stakeholders. And we found actually that, relatively speaking, school heads have been given very little attention, even though they are crucial. They are that link between the schools, the innovation that is happening in schools, the development, the learning that is happening in schools, and the rest of the system. And the working group are encouraging more attention to be paid to this particular subgroup of what we broadly call school leaders, those with positions of responsibility in school settings. France is just one example. They're not the only example, but they're one example of a developed leadership program. Now, such programs may require more investment, but I think it's interesting to note that what France has done is that it's also considered the kind of direct or face-to-face intensive training for its new and existing school leaders, and thought, we have this, how can we also maybe extend that offer to those who maybe don't want to take the full programme, who want to study individual modules to sort of lead their own development outside of that programme. And that is where they've taken a blended learning approach, and I think that's an interesting consideration, that you can see there that you can attend the institute over a 2-year period for face-to-face training, and as well take distance learning courses, or you can elect to take a number of modules just as distance learning, and through that they've actually managed to reach more prospective and existing school leaders through that programme. You can also see the topics that they've chosen to focus on, that it is not just on the management or the administration of schools, but really thinking about how that fits into or links to the way in which the school education system is working. And then also at a more local level, topics that focus on the learning, on developing pupils, on developing staff within the school setting, and crucially, I think also networking and local approaches, this idea that the school head is going to be that connection with local organisations, with the local community, and that is something that they've included in their leadership programme. And then just as a final example, actually, I wanted to highlight some city initiatives. At the peer learning activity in Antwerp, we were delighted and very interested to see human resource approaches, the kind of practices that have been developed in businesses, in other organisations, brought into school education, and more detail on that is in the reports, but ways of thinking differently about how to have a dialogue between school leaders and teachers was a really interesting example there. Also, the work of Eurocities, are representative of the working group from Eurocities is actually from Antwerp, and they are doing an awful lot in Antwerp and elsewhere to encourage networking, to encourage new ideas, and they even have a new project, the Happy Teachers Project, which is based on this exact the exact challenges and ideas about teachers and school leader careers, and supporting those in different ways. And that project, subject to funding, will hopefully go on to work in a number of different cities. Amsterdam is another final example that you might find interesting, in that they have activated their school boards. Those are the school boards that operate at or slightly above the level of the school head, to collaborate between themselves on really trying to work on the attractiveness of the school education profession. That, for example, they've developed these 1-year expert programs, these professional development programs where teachers can specialise in a particular area, and they're also trying to support dialogue around school careers, not just about pedagogical practice. And the links are there if you want to have a look at that work. So it was a long presentation for the first time, for this exclusive presentation of the work. I hope it has been useful to you in some ways, some useful insights, some ideas to think about. The next steps is the publication of this policy guide that I mentioned, the draft was finished yesterday. We will be validating that at the next working group meeting at the beginning of March. We will also be launching it officially at the conference, Teachers and Trainers for the Future, which is taking place at the end of March in Croatia. Further information will always be shared as much as possible via our usual European Commission channels and on the School Education Gateway, which fortunately I am also the manager of, so that makes dissemination quite easy from my perspective. And then my colleague might want to say a few more things about the future European framework, that we hope very much that, and we are sure that Flanders will continue to be very much involved, not only in this topic, but in all of our work on school education, that the future European framework on education and training is in development, and then we will then be looking and planning ahead for that. There's also the opportunity for peer counselling. This is a tool that we have, a peer learning tool that we have, where a country can come forward with a particular problem, with a particular challenge, and invite other countries to come and work on that over a number of weeks in a sort of meeting, workshop type environment to share practice. And of course we also have the Erasmus Program for supporting not just individuals but strategic partnership projects in school education and policy experimentation. So with that, I will thank you very much, and unless you want to say a few more words, thank you.
20 seconds just to say what is the future framework. Basically, I said the ministers gave a mandate. We've worked now, so in autumn we'll draw the conclusions from the Commission side in a political document and present it to countries. And in November of this year, education ministers will again discuss how they want to organize their European cooperation in the years ahead. So this is what's coming here. How do we go ahead in terms of working methods, but also which topics should be dealt with. So that will be one discussion ministers will do, and then we'll see how to bring this work forward at the political level. And as Hannah said, there's always the possibilities for countries who are interested to get some peer learning on particular questions coming from the countries and support through the Erasmus program. So thank you very much for the attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation, which gave us a view on educational systems from a European perspective, and thank you also for sharing this exclusive results from the working group on schools and, of course, also the country examples. Are there questions? Perhaps you can take your headphones. Mr. Daniels.
Thank you very well for all the information, and it's. I think there are a few good images in your presentation that we can use. I will give my questions in Dutch because there's also. So I will wait. Ik wil even verder ingaan op de weg, het beeld van de weg dat u hebt geschetst. Dat leerkrachten eigenlijk geen uitwegen zien. Waar u dan verder op ingaat in de diverse opportuniteiten, mogelijkheden. Dat is denk ik een heel goed beeld. Maar ik heb daarbij de volgende vraag. Leerkrachten is een beroep met een zekere vorm van zekerheid. We weten uit onderzoek, als mensen kiezen voor het lerarenberoep, dat die een vorm van zekerheid willen. En dus het opnemen van verschillende rollen, dat ze dat eigenlijk ervaren als moeilijk en lastig. Als we het heel concreet maken, een leerkracht geeft les in het secundair onderwijs in de 3e graad een bepaald vak. En de directeur zegt, ik wil je visie opentrekken en ik vraag je om een ander vak te geven in de 2e graad. Dan zien zij dat niet als het doorbreken van de vlakke loopbaan, maar dan wordt dat ervaren als stress, als iets wat niet aangenaam is. Dus mijn vraag is is dat een opportuniteit of is dat net hetgene waarvoor het profiel dat voor leerkracht kiest, dat eigenlijk ziet als een hindernis? Mijn tweede vraag, en het is ook een interessant beeld, het is over de diverse rollen die men kan opnemen, dat u naar voren schuift. Ik denk dat dat iets is wat we al lang weten in onderwijs. Van we willen leerkrachten verschillende rollen laten opnemen. Alleen is de vraag, en dan ga ik toch wat naar het concrete, van hoe doen we dat? Uit onderzoek en uit de theorie weten we dat dit voor een aantal mensen openheid biedt, kansen biedt, motivatie biedt. Maar we stellen wel vast dat het in de praktijk moeilijk te realiseren is. Of het althans moeilijker, changing contexts. We hebben ooit een programma gehad in Vlaanderen waar leerkrachten een stage konden doen in een bedrijf en dan vervangen werden. Ja, dat programma is eigenlijk stilgelegd omdat er nauwelijks interesse voor was. Omdat leerkrachten dan hun klas moesten afgeven. En ja, 2 weken of 3 weken was er dan een vervanger. En ze kwamen dan terug. En ja, dat was niet helemaal gelopen, die 2, 3 weken, in hun klas. Hun verantwoordelijkheid, hun professionele identiteit met die klas. En ja, dan zeiden ze, dan blijf ik liever in mijn klas dan uit mijn klas te gaan. Dus als u daar in Europa ergens plaatsen ziet waar het wel gebeurt, dan graag. En dan een laatste vraag nog, in verband met de schooldirecteurs. We hebben in Vlaanderen een vrij specifieke situatie, dat we het ministerie hebben, de politiek, langs de ene kant, ministerie. Maar dan hebben we in Vlaanderen ook een aantal tussenstructuren, helemaal anders dan in Frankrijk, koepels genaamd, die scholen ondersteunen, maar die ook zelf een visie uitwerken. En dus heb je in Vlaanderen de overheid die zich bezighoudt enkel en alleen met de inhoud, niet met de visie. De school en leerkrachten die eigenlijk ook met visie bezig zijn in hun school, die professionele identiteit. En daarnaast hebben we nog de koepel waar die scholen toe behoren, die ook een vorm van professionele identiteit, visie ontwikkelen. En daar zijn leerkrachten en directies, want u focust ook op directies, zijn directies soms in de moeilijkheid van broodheer zijn of iedereen ten goede willen komen, waardoor zij letterlijk tussen hamer en aanbeeld komen te zetten. Langs de ene kant de leerkrachten, langs de andere kant het beleid, maar ook die koepel waar zij toe behoren. En dat voor hen soms een moeilijke plaats is, nog los van alle taken die we van directies daarnaast nog in de realiteit verwachten. Dat zijn eigenlijk drie concrete vragen die ik u naar aanleiding van de presentatie en een aantal interessante beelden daarin alvast wou stellen. Dank u wel.
Dank u wel, meneer Daniels. Meneer Van den Bergen.
Dank u wel. Ik zal ook mijn vragen in het Nederlands stellen, omdat het altijd niet zo is. Eerst en vooral dank u wel voor de zeer interessante en verrijkende toelichting. Ik vond het echt een meerwaarde om het een keer vanuit een ander perspectief te bekijken. En na het zien van jullie presentatie kun je wel vaststellen dat de geesten steeds meer aan het rijpen zijn, ook op Europees niveau, dat de manier van lesgeven, maar ook de aanpak naar leidinggevend, dat dat aan het evolueren is en dat dat ook op een andere manier moet worden aangepakt, dat het model van pakweg, ik ga niet zo ver terug gaan, 10 jaar, niet meer aan de orde is op vandaag. Dus dat verheugt mij. Mijn concrete vraag naar jullie toe, kunt u ze niet onmiddellijk beantwoorden, geen probleem, dan krijg je ook wel de antwoord nog nadien. De aantrekkelijkheid van het job en de werkzekerheid voor leerkrachten, ik denk dat dat een hele belangrijke is, die ook hierin terugkomt. Want om eigenlijk je loopbaan werkbaar en flexibel te maken en minder vlak, zoals u met die foto heel mooi aangaf, tijdens uw uiteenzetting, hebben wij met onze fractie 2 jaar geleden of 3 jaar geleden een nieuw loopbaanmodel voor leerkrachten van morgen voorgesteld. Dat is op basis van een vliegtuigprincipe, waarin dat we zeggen de startbaan dat je 5 jaar garantie heeft aan de leerkrachten om een vaste job te hebben, zodat ze kunnen leren, ondersteund door ervaren leerkrachten. Dan, wij noemen dat de zenitbaan, waarin dat men je carrière verder kan uitbouwen als ervaren leerkracht. En dan de landingsbaan, mensen die al heel lang in het onderwijs zitten en met pensioen in het vooruitzicht, dat zij eigenlijk de mogelijkheid geboden worden om af te stappen van dat zuiver lesmodel, maar ook eigenlijk de dienst te tellen van het vakteam van de jonge leerkrachten van de schoolgroep. Mijn vraag daaromtrent is het volgens jullie een voorstel die min of meer op jullie lijn zit van de studies die jullie hebben gedaan? En denk dat dat een werkbaar model zou kunnen zijn in Vlaanderen en bij uitbreiding ook binnen de Europese Unie. Dat dat een model is die zou kunnen grosso modo worden uitgewerkt. De lerarenopleiding heb ik ook heel aandachtig beluisterd. De lerarenopleiding moet ook hier in Vlaanderen worden herbekeken. En zou het bijvoorbeeld een goed idee zijn om een bepaalde stagejaar in te voeren in de lerarenopleiding. Dat moet dan ook bekeken worden van, kijk, je hebt een vaste stagejaar, waarin ze misschien ook al een vergoeding krijgen, maar dat ze echt al geïmplementeerd zijn voor een jaar aan een stuk in een bepaalde school. Denken jullie dat dit een extra motivatie zou zijn voor de studenten om dan te kiezen voor de lerarenopleiding, dat ze niet na 3 jaar studies aan lot worden overgelaten en korte interims moeten doen, maar eigenlijk echt al een bepaald soort stagejaar kunnen, dat ze echt wel 1 jaar al in school werken met een bepaalde vergoeding en dat ze eigenlijk ook al rapper die link leggen. Ik vind het heel belangrijk dat jullie verder werken op Europees niveau. Maar jullie zeggen, we gaan met de ministers van de Europese Unie samen zitten om te kijken wat er verder moet worden gewerkt. Want de problematiek in ons land is een problematiek die ook vaststelt in andere Europese landen. Het lerarentekort. Zoals Nederland, Duitsland, Zweden. Het zijn ook voorbeelden waar men een enorm leerkrachtentekort heeft. En elk op zich ondernemen acties om dit tekort aan te pakken. Maar niemand weet eigenlijk op vandaag, maar ook in onze commissie, welke acties dat er nu echt werken op korte, middellange en lange termijn. En in uw uiteenzetting zegt u terecht dat we meer aandacht moeten hebben voor het ondersteunen van leerkrachten en schoolleiders. Ik sta daar volledig achter, maar mijn vraag concreet. Oplossingen op lange termijn zijn er wellicht voorhanden. Het aantrekken van zijinstromers, absolute planlastvermindering, meer ondersteuning, de leraarloopbaan aantrekkelijker maken. Maar hebben jullie ook aanbevelingen voor ons? De Vlaamse overheid hoe we prangend lerarentekort op korte en middellange termijn kunnen aanpakken zonder te moeten inboeten, en dat is belangrijk, op de kwaliteit van ons onderwijs. Dus dat is ook een vraag die ik met jullie wil meegeven. En dan voldoende tijd. Ik heb hier heel wat heel interessante voorstellen gezien. Van oké, we moeten af van die vlakke loopbaan, peer tutoring, we moeten leren van elkaar. Schoolhoofden moeten meer managers zijn en moeten tijd hebben om met hun leerkrachten aan de slag te gaan, noem maar op. Heel interessant allemaal, maar het is zo moeilijk om in de vaste structuren van het onderwijs die er op vandaag is, toch zeker in ons land, om daar voldoende ruimte voor vrij te maken, om dat te kunnen doen. Vandaar mijn voorlopig laatste concrete vraag. Hoe zien jullie dat om die tijd echt te gaan creëren, om die zaken te kunnen doen? Want via PowerPoints en notas, dat is een mooie stap. Maar het moet ook allemaal heel concreet in de praktijk om te zetten zijn. En dat zie ik nog niet onmiddellijk hoe dat zou kunnen gebeuren. Maar het is in ieder geval wel een goede stap vooruit. Dank u wel.
Dank u wel, meneer Van den Bergen. Mevrouw Van Dromme.
Dank je wel ook in naam van onze fractie voor de zeer interessante toelichting. Ik heb een aantal vragen. En de eerste vraag gaat over de leerkracht. De leerkracht die wellicht niet bestaat, maar waar we soms wel op zoek naar zijn. Maar misschien zijn er toch wel een aantal criteria of een aantal eigenschappen van leerkrachten. En dan denk ik dat en collega Daniels verwees er al voor een stuk naar, dat leerkrachten misschien ook wel ingerend ergens op zoek zijn naar een soort zekerheid. En misschien ook kiezen voor onderwijs, net omdat het een zekere structuur, een vaste job is waar ze naar op zoek zijn. Is er onderzoek waaruit blijkt dat net die mensen die dan vroegtijdig het onderwijs verlaten, misschien net die leerkrachten zijn die dan wel op zoek zijn naar de uitdaging of net wel dat eigenaarschap van een loopbaan kunnen vastpakken. Dus dat je eigenlijk verschillende soorten profielen hebt binnen het leraar zijn. En daaraan gekoppeld dan, bij ons hier in Vlaanderen erkennen we of zien we dat er eigenlijk weinig cultuur is naar levenslang leren. Is dat iets wat je herkent ook in andere landen? En is daar ook het onderscheid tussen die twee soortcategorieën binnen het leraar zijn? Daaraan gekoppeld misschien, hier in de commissie onderwijs zijn er ook een aantal mensen die les hebben gegeven. Dus mochten we daar onze ervaring kunnen meegeven, ook in de politiek is er toekomst voor mensen die rond onderwijs willen bezig zijn. Directeurs, Rond directeurs eventjes. Een belangrijke opdracht is het bezig zijn met schoolontwikkeling. En ik vroeg me af of er onderzoek was naar de tijdsbesteding van de directeur of van het schoolhoofd. Of dat daar duidelijkheid rond is. Want als je ziet wat er eigenlijk allemaal verwacht wordt van een directeur, dan denk ik dat er misschien wel nagedacht moet worden, is het wel haalbaar om dat allemaal uit te voeren? En vooral dan naar het luik personeelsbeleid, naar het levenslang leren, op zoek gaan naar welke wensen zijn er eigenlijk binnen het personeel. Zo'n verscheidenheid, wat bestaat er daar rond onderzoek? Zelf geloof ik heel sterk in het leren van elkaar. Ik heb ooit een voorstel gedaan om een Erasmus-project op te starten tussen verschillende scholen, omdat als je les volgt in een eerder school die technisch onderwijs aanbiedt, weet je niet altijd wat er in een andere school aangeboden wordt, dus dat je daar eigenlijk elkaar kunt vervangen. Zijn daar voorbeelden van, zonder dat je het vliegtuig moet nemen naar een ander land, maar dat je eigenlijk van heel dichtbij ook kunt gaan leren. Misschien nog gekoppeld ook aan het leraar zijn. Ik merk dat ook de paradox tussen enerzijds het isolement dat je hebt als leerkracht om voor de klas te staan en verantwoordelijk te zijn voor het leerproces van je individuele leerlingen. En aan de andere kant de uitdaging om samen te gaan werken, om te leren van elkaar, om in co-teaching processen te stappen. Dan denk ik dat dat iets is wat misschien voor sommige mensen ook net de uitdaging is, maar voor andere mensen net het verlies van die autonomie in de klas, dat misschien ook wel iets is waar we over moeten nadenken. En dan als laatste is mijn vraag naar de taak rond de taak van de overheid. Moet die net gaan sturen of moet die net heel veel vrijheid geven? Moet er heel veel ruimte komen voor die individuele scholen om in hun lokale context hun school te gaan organiseren? Of moeten we vanuit de overheid toch hier en daar een aantal items inbouwen, een aantal structuren gaan geven? Wat is jullie visie daar rond? Of zijn er binnen Europa daar lijnen in te trekken? Of kunnen we daar leren uit de verschillende contexten? Dank je wel.
Meneer Broens.
Ja, ook namens mij dank u wel voor de duidelijke toelichting. Een heel korte vraag. Wij geloven heel sterk in een sterk leiderschap van scholen, voor de kwaliteit van scholen. Dat daar een oorzakelijk verband is duidelijk, denk ik. Jullie verwijzen naar heel wat leiderschapsprogramma's in Europa. Is daar ook wetenschappelijk onderzoek naar de effecten van die programma's op de kwaliteit van de school, op het vasthouden van die directeuren, op de instroom van die directeuren? Is daar vergelijkend onderzoek tussen scholen die leiderschapsprogramma's gevolgd hebben en directeuren die niet gevolgd hebben?
Mevrouw Meuleman.
Ja, ook op mijn beurt bedankt voor de primeur en de interessante insteek. Ik heb nog een aantal bedenkingen, want we hebben vorige week ook al een reeks hoorzittingen gehad die heel erg interessant waren. En daarop voortbouwend, mobiliteit. Bekijken jullie vooral, en dus manieren om die vlakke loopbaan aan te pakken binnen het beroep van leerkracht zelf. Maar vorige week hadden wij Teach for Belgium hier op bezoek. En een insteek was eigenlijk een stukje om een lerarenopleiding te zien zoals dat je een diploma geschiedenis of politieke wetenschappen of zo zou zien. Een opleiding waarbij dat je een reeks aan competenties verwerft die maatschappelijk en economisch belangrijk zijn en waarmee dat je dus nog alle richtingen uit kan. En ook de job als leerkracht wordt dan niet gezien als iets waar dat je voor de rest van je leven vast aan zit, maar gewoon als een fase waarin dat je een reeks vaardigheden gaat verwerven, waarmee dat je dan ook nog andere jobs kan gaan uitoefenen. En in feite vind ik dat wel een heel prikkelende gedachte, omdat het idee dat je start aan iets waar je voor aan vasthangt voor de rest van je leven, voor heel wat mensen wel daunting kan zijn. Zo. En dat zorgt er ook voor dat het dan een keuze wordt, waarbij dat ze het niet als eerste kiezen, ook omdat ze nog niet zien zitten om al helemaal vast te zitten. Dus mochten we zo naar lerarenopleidingen kijken, en dan krijg je natuurlijk ook de mobiliteit, waarbij mensen ook weer terug zullen instappen, of van andere beroepen ook zullen instappen. Maar dat we kijken van welke competenties hebben we nodig, welke verwerven we, wat kunnen we daar allemaal mee doen. En die mobiliteit nog veel meer extern te gaan bekijken, zou misschien ook een interessante gedachte zijn. Ik weet niet of het daar bij jullie ook over gegaan is, of dat iets is wat jullie ook bekijken. Hetzelfde met dan het bouwen van een netwerk en de ondersteuning op de klasvloer enzovoort. Ook dat zie je misschien nogal als een systeem binnen het schoolwezen zelf. Maar ook hier, als je daarvoor ook echt de deuren van de school gaat opengooien en gaat kijken van hoe kunnen we dat netwerk versterken en die visie op die school en die school deel uitmaken van de gemeenschap waarin ze zich bevindt. En dus ook andere mensen laten binnenkomen in die school, laten die ondersteuning bieden op de klasvloer die soms nodig is. Zou je misschien ook wel een beweging krijgen die interessant is, met meer handen op de klasvloer die nodig zijn. Een soort community met een gedragen visie die breder gaat dan de school zelf. En die ervoor zorgt u begrijpt wat ik bedoel waarschijnlijk. Dus dat zijn twee zaken zo, die nog wat meer out of the box en opengooien. En mijn vraag is of dat ook aan bod is gekomen bij jullie.
Mevrouw Krekels.
Ja, dank u wel, mevrouw de voorzitter. Ik heb eigenlijk maar een heel korte vraag. We kunnen analyseren wat we willen, maar als we nu bedenken waarom leerkrachtenberoep minder interessant wordt, dan moeten we ook durven toegeven dat dat misschien komt omdat wij van onze leerkrachten eigenlijk te veel vragen. Ze moeten duizendpoten zijn, ze moeten lesgeven, maar ze moeten ook nog allerlei andere taken in scholen vervullen. Ze zitten met diversiteit in de klassen, ze zitten met leerlingen die een IQ hebben van 80 tot 150. Ze worden op verantwoordelijkheden gewezen, ze moeten constant ook veranderen in de manier waarop ze lesgeven. De instructiemethode is niet meer goed, we gaan naar groepsmodellen. Er moet altijd verandering komen. Dus mijn vraag is, als we dan toch Europees het bekijken, in welke landen is er momenteel geen probleem om leerkrachten aan te trekken? En welke verantwoordelijkheden geven die landen aan hun leerkrachten? Dat zou ik eigenlijk wel eens graag willen weten.
Meneer Laarmans.
Ja, dank u mevrouw de voorzitter. Ik zou willen aansluiten bij de vorige vraag. Ik heb altijd liever wat concretere dingen dan theoretische concepten. Het ging over directies onder meer, ondersteuning van leidinggevenden op scholen. Het is heel goed dat daar aandacht voor is. Maar is er een goede vergelijking al gemaakt tussen de systemen van verloning, dus de betaling van directies, hoeveel die verdienen in verhouding met andere leidinggevenden enzovoort. Dus ik denk dat die vaak onderbetaald zijn. En ten tweede dat die kreunen onder de taaklast, dat is hier al regelmatig in de commissie aan bod gekomen. We hebben hier een ex-directeur die dat weet, maar ik zag ook weer voorbeelden van mensen die er onderdoor gaan in de laatste dagen. En op welke manier worden die taken beter verdeeld in andere landen? Of probeert men toch die directeurs beter te ondersteunen, maar concreet dan? Dus niet enkel theoretische concepten, je kunt dat studeren en je kunt dat nog gaan doen. Die directeurs hebben graag concretere antwoorden.
Meneer Daniels.
Ja, excuseer, de vraag van collega Krekels inspireerde mij om daar nog één vraagje bij te stellen. Van landen die geen tekort hebben aan leraren, om daar ook even de economische situatie van dat land tegenover te zetten. Omdat, en we hebben dat ook in Vlaanderen gemerkt, landen of regio's waar het economisch zeer goed gaat en er heel veel concurrentie is op de arbeidsmarkt, dat dan overheidsjobs, wat het meestal wel zijn, onderwijs, zorg, dat we daar op een krapte komen. En landen waar het economisch veel minder goed gaat, dat dan overheidsjobs terug wel in de kijker staan. Dus ik voeg dat nog even toe aan de vraag van mijn collega Krekels. Als u die beantwoordt, dat u dat stukje dan ook meeneemt. Als u zegt van in die land is er geen tekort aan leerkrachten. Als u die informatie nu hebt, dat u ook even de economische situatie van dat land of die regio dan meegeeft. Dank u.
Okay, any more questions? Mevrouw van Drommen.
Misschien nog aansluitend ook. De War on Talent is er niet alleen binnen onderwijs, maar ook in heel wat andere sectoren. En mijn vraag concreet is, zijn er concurrentievoordelen of nadelen in de verschillende sectoren? En hoe zien we onderwijs dan ten opzichte van die andere sectoren? En kunnen we daar ook iets uit leren?
A lot of interesting questions. I give the floor back to you.
Okay. I will. I think some of my responses might overlap, but I will obviously try and cover all of the questions as much as possible. I may need to ask you to ask the question again if I've missed anything. So to go back to the first questions, I think it's a very important point. When we got very excited, enthusiastic about talking about diverse roles and opportunities, and I can completely understand that this gives the impression that it might come across as a demand for all teachers, and this was raised in the working group, and that we said that it was really important for us and for anyone else who's talking about careers to say that absolutely it is okay to remain a classroom teacher. Absolutely, that we realised that we were in danger of saying, "Oh no, you need to be this. You need to be a digital skills guru. You need to be doing this, doing that." And as a former teacher myself, I know that it is absolutely overwhelming. It is enough just to get through your 5 or 6 classes per day and make it home in one piece. So I think that is a very important point that you make. In terms of action or ideas or ways of managing the increased expectations, every time we say something on anything, on competence, oh no, teachers need to do this, and teachers need to do this, and teachers need to do this. How do we deal with that? In terms of a country example, I think at school level, the dialogue is very important. We have an example from, off the top of my head, from Scotland, of work that they did in 2011 in particular and after, about improving the dialogue that happens in school and the way those conversations happen, to make sure that it is with a sense of the individual being in control of what's expected of them, and going in ways in which they do want to go, or if they don't want to follow something, to say that's okay and to look at what suits those teachers. So I think the work that was done, the research that was done around dialogue, around mentoring, I think it is important and useful there. I'm thinking just what else about those questions in terms of time. This is an interesting link, I think, with the aeroplane idea of taking off, of being, and then towards the end, that is perhaps a phase in which you are expected to support others. And I think thinking about what the expectations are of teachers and school leaders at different stages of their career is useful to be clear about, that there aren't all of these expectations and you have to be able to do all of them from day one, that you can work on certain things, and then when it is right for you and right for your school and right for your home situation and whatever else is going on in your life, that is when you then might feel that you could take on an extra responsibility or start to work and to share things with your peers. That's another thing I think that was that you raised importantly, was about the feelings of anxiety or negative feelings that can arise from being expected to be very open about what you are doing. That we know that along with the perceptions of working in of that single track, the security that can come with having the classroom to yourself is something that we've talked about. And shifting attitudes for teachers and school leaders to understand, a little step at a time, that it is all right to let other people in, or even to go and visit and to watch and to share your practice with others and give advice. And that's not something that can, an attitude that can change overnight, but it needs to happen gradually. There was another question, I think, that was asked about exchange between schools. I'm jumping a little between questions, but I think it's linked here. We do have examples of exchange where teachers, there are actual programs, national programs, Portugal and Serbia being two, and that's from the 2018 report. We have details in there of where they actually built programs which supported and gave time being very important, the opportunity to share, where schools are paired together or just very small clusters of schools are brought together in order to learn from each other. So there is an example there. Other questions? You had another question about different visions. Yes, about the difficulty, the potential difficulty, if you have schools developing some ideas and umbrella organisations and then a ministry idea. This is something that we acknowledged, and this was part of our thinking about the framework for teacher careers. And see, a framework is only going to work if it is done with conversation, with dialogue. It's going to risk not working or doing the thing it is meant to do if you create a framework internally and then impose it on the system. And that is something that I know Croatia are very conscious of, and what they have done in the last year is, with their curriculum reform, is at the same time realising that that is going to impact, hopefully positively, and provide opportunities for teacher careers, teacher and school leader careers. But what they did is they actually put that out to more public or to stakeholder consultation in order to get ideas to ask what would be useful for you and what kind of things should we include. And I think they had about almost 1,500 responses to that. So it's a more, they would say, is a bottom-up approach, and making sure that whatever framework or mapping or structure is brought in to help create a shared language and a shared vision is done in consultation. There was a question on a year of the practical training, and I think this links, we've been talking about it recently. When we did the work on initial teacher education, it's obviously diversity in terms of approaches to initial teacher education, long 5-year degree courses, short, myself, graduate, more 1-year fast-track programs with a lot of practical experience. The work we've been doing recently really has been focusing more on opportunities for mobility that are more short-term or that are embedded in those. So rather than saying, this is how training, this is how teacher education should be, this fixed model, saying, okay, it exists differently, but think about the benefits of mobility within that. I'm sorry, that's quite a general idea, but we have an example is through e-twinning. So through our connection between schools in Europe, we've been in dialogue with initial teacher education institutions to see how they can, within their courses, within their initial teacher education, talk about, discuss, explore European cooperation. And that, I think that's just one example where then the graduates of those courses are already then familiar with Erasmus programs, that the idea of connecting with a teacher in another country is not totally bizarre and new to them. So I think that's the way in which we've particularly been working on that as an example. Time. Time has been mentioned a few times, and you were asking about how we can, if there are any examples of changing time allocation to allow for all of these exciting opportunities to be taken up. The one example I can think of right now is that Ireland, I think it is, Ireland reduced the teaching hours, I think it was by a very small amount, not even 30 minutes per week. It was even less than that. But what they said was, we're going to reduce that teaching time, and then over the course of a month, you will then build up some hours which should then or could then be used for this or this or this. They were particularly looking at trying to encourage teachers within schools to sit together and to discuss their opportunities and to discuss their professional development and ways in which they wanted to help their own school develop. But they realised they couldn't just say to schools, you need to do this, but they needed to take that step to say, okay, we're going to be flexible a little bit in terms of giving you a bit more time, then you can decide how you want to spend that usefully. I can try and find more details on that for you. Another question was on, is there teacher research on reasons for leaving? I'm sure there is, but I'm pretty sure also that researchers would find those leavers difficult to access once they've gone. And I think even in Flanders, you've tried to find them and tried to grab them before they leave and find out why. Is it linked to characteristics? I had thought that, well, it would be rather tragic if we just kept in school education all the people who didn't want to be innovative or explore new possibilities and just be one type of teacher. I think this links also to that point you were making about the question about the possibility of training and saying this is not this professional development you're doing isn't just for school education, it could be used in lots of different ways. I suppose I can't point to particular research on why they're leaving and therefore then say, well, this could then be the action that could be taken. I suppose our response would be a balance needs to be struck, an acknowledgement that we just don't do one career anymore, and that maybe it is something that is not just. You're right, it is not just a school education issue, it is something that if you're looking at employment opportunities generally, that perhaps this is a wider discussion to have with other sectors and say, yes, super, do this, do that. I do know, though, with the other concern with that, of course, is that you don't want to project the idea that you can just dipping into teaching and then suddenly disappearing is beneficial for schools. Now, of course, mobility, placements, secondments, all are good, but the expectation, and this is something that the working groups say, is that that is then meant to be bringing expertise back into the school that helps it develop. And that we know that countries are even looking at, including, for example, Cyprus. Sometimes they say, well, you do a certain number of years in a school and then you must move. And the schools are actually finding that very difficult, and the teachers are finding it difficult because they're starting to feel part of a community that they need to take 6 or 7 years to really feel secure and to feel like they're ready to take on a new responsibility, and then they have to move, and then they now have to go to a new community. And that is perhaps, that's a possibly dangerous side of that idea. If you move. Now, again, it might come down to the individuals, and I suppose that's about the flexibility of the system to say, if that is what is motivating for you and helps you develop, then we provide that flexibility. However, we still want to keep people who are good and enthusiastic because they can really benefit and help schools to develop. I've mentioned Cyprus. I also wrote down Cyprus and Estonia as being examples. There was a question about leaving something to the autonomy of the schools. I gave those examples because obviously systems are different, and small countries can be different to larger countries. In terms of the central authority management of where teachers are, where they go, what they do next, about overseeing their evaluation, their professional development. Again, I think I noted Estonia and Finland because there was a question about where there aren't struggling for teachers, where teachers are hugely respected, where people want to be teachers, where they all have master's degrees, and yet these countries still are working on their idea of career progression because they see that they see that more can be done to encourage. I think it's linking it to school development and this this idea that being a professional in school education is not just about being competent in the way in which you do your daily job, that it is about being part of a wider community, that it is being excited about school development. And so I think they're looking at ways of, even if they're not struggling for teachers per se, numbers, recruitment, that it's the regeneration part that they actually, you know, they still feel it is worth looking at. And that's why I highlighted recruitment, retention and regeneration as 3 things there. Looking at other examples, has there been research about the effect of leadership programs? Those that I know of and that are well established have evaluated, and I can think there is a specific example of Norway, who they had their leadership training program, I think it was 2009, I think it started, so I would say that that's well established, and they do have evaluation, they do have evidence of the positive impact, and this is reported by those who have taken part in that training. Okay, it's self-reported data, but I think that might be an example that is looked into. I don't have any examples or know of research that has shown that leadership training is a negative experience. Also on the France leadership example, I wanted to add that this idea of not just being exclusive to school education, their leadership program, their Institute for Leadership, the people on those courses are not just from school education. So you could be training, you could be developing your management, you take your management course alongside, where they're divided into groups for the sake of context, alongside healthcare leaders and other sort of organisation business leaders. So that, I think, again, is an interesting example to look at. Did we look into in and out of the profession? We posed this question very early on about whether to attract, or this idea of attracting from outside of schools, particularly in terms of leadership roles. And there was, to be honest, a slightly shocked reaction, because it's not a common idea. The main issue that the working group members saw was to think, how could a school head lead and develop a school if they did not have that pedagogical experience, other than, of course, being a child in school themselves some years ago. And that was the real problem point. We didn't get past that. We know that leadership programs have, that school head programs, they have different dimensions to them. The expectations of school heads, of course, include leadership, competence, management, that they do include pedagogical aspects, as we saw in the French example, and also many of them have a sort of judicial, the understanding of the legal workings of the system aspect to it, which says something about the expectations of school leaders. So we talked about it. There is an example. There are a few schools in Portugal we know of that they do have leaders who work on different roles, so they actually divide the role. So you could come in and you could just be responsible for the management of the school and just, I suppose, the more administration side, and also that there are examples of other countries, including multi-academy trusts in the UK, where you can be the chief executive of a number of schools. There's another example that I saw recently of there being 2 school heads, and they bring their own talents to those roles, and they're complementary. So there are examples out there. We didn't come to any big conclusions on that, though. What did I miss? Yes.
Thank you so much for these challenging questions. Just a few things to add on. I think if you to start with, I mean, what do teachers need? I still find it very important to say that according to the surveys we have, it's more than 90% of the teachers tell us that they went to the profession and they are teachers because they want to do something for the young people, for the children, and also for society. I mean, there has been a survey done sort of last year, and that's the first motivation of everyone. So I think it's very true, as you said, that for many it's also important to have the job security in that part. But let's also say that we have here a very well motivated also working force and a group of people. Many of them have challenges in the job. Many also choose the job because of the salary conditions and security, but we also have many, many people who really like what they do, and they do it because they want to do this particular job. And I think that's because at the start, when you mentioned rightly, the security is an important part. We have both sides of it. And I think if you think of let's say, the situation in Flanders in particular, because, I mean, you pay your teachers in the upper secondary in particular quite well if you look into other countries. I mean, we have countries where the pay is really very, very bad. I mean, you pay teachers with the salaries which are always debated, but I mean, when you compare in comparative way, if you compare it to other people who have a master or bachelor degrees, at least at upper secondary level, they are well paid. And still you're struggling with getting enough people into the profession. So I think that's why we think because it's of course important to have a certain pay, but we have many people around nowadays who want to develop over the course, who like it, and who get the motivation from what they're doing. So that's why we thought it's important to look at these sort of ways of making the profession attractive outside the salary conditions. What is also very important, came across, this is the vision of the teaching. There may be still people who like it doing on their own and alone in the classroom, but I think there we really have to get away, and there's a change there. I think there is no job, and there I would really say teaching is not different from any other job. You cannot stay in a job, just do it yourself and do it for yourself for decades without ever speaking to your colleagues, without going to professional development and so on. I mean, let's say Hannah is a wonderful colleague. She's great, but she also became great because she has been talking about this for years with other colleagues, exchanging it with your colleagues from your countries and so on. So that's how we all learn, and that goes for teaching. For teachers, very often it is still too much, this impression, I do it alone in my classroom, I don't talk to my colleagues. So that's something because you ask for some concrete things that could be done. I think there's really something, this idea that a school as a community where you together with colleagues develop your teaching. If a colleague comes into your classroom, it's not about controlling you, it's about helping you to exchange and in becoming better. So, and I think that's a vision that we really have to work on. And it is something which this teamwork idea is something which is really important. And it's actually also quite interesting if you look at the situation in Flanders. I mean, to our information, for example, continuous professional development is actually offered, but it's not obligatory, if I understand it correctly. But you correct me if I'm wrong. So the continuous training. So I think that's something, well, to be seen how maybe it's better if it's not obligatory, because then it's only those who are motivated to take part into the jobs. But that's something where, for you to consider how that is done. And the other feedback we often have is that if and including from Flanders, if the teachers go to a training, much too often it is the type of training they get is standardized courses, where the latest development in using digital tools in the teaching, or how do you deal with this and that topic. While the teachers very often tell us, I mean, what I would really need is sort of to have some mentoring programs, or peer learning amongst teachers, because they say if I talk to a colleague who tells me what he or she has done, that will help me much more. So maybe it's when we looked at the Flemish community, it was a bit something to be thought about. If the offer that is there, is it something that could be further developed? Question to you in your further deliberations. And I mean, also on on the projects, at least we know. I mean, it's true because you also mentioned if teachers are away from the classroom, it sort of disturbs the planning and the rhythm. I have missed 2 or 3 weeks of my classes. It's difficult to organize. If this is part of the way a school is organized, then it becomes manageable. But if I know that a larger number of colleagues are doing this, and I know in a school, let's say every year in March or April, I will do my school exchange, pupils may move, teachers may move, then it's something a school can take into account, and then it will not be perceived any longer as disrupting, but as something which was helping my teaching. Because at the end of the day, if we do the exchanges, then it is in order to support teachers, not to take them out and make their job more difficult. So, and that's, I mean, because someone had asked what is the research on our programs. At least the feedback we get on the use of e-twinning or also on Erasmus projects is that the big majority of the teachers and headmasters tell us, yeah, when I came back, I had learned something in terms of becoming a better pedagogue, working better. So at least for the European programs, we can show that they themselves said this has helped me into developing professionally. So, and I think that's the good news. So there was also the question about what is the objective of the authority task on the overhead. I mean, so it's always the getting the right balance between how much autonomy you leave and how much you control it. I mean, it's the way we have in Europe examples where you left everything to the schools and it went completely wrong because some schools were doing excellent jobs and others were very bad, and others countries which have too much control and they killed all types of creativity at the school level. So that's a bit exactly the type of balance to get. And I mean, the example you gave with the directors, the headmasters and the couples is exactly the one which shows how difficult it is to find the right balance between trusting the teachers, but also telling you, we give you autonomy, but I'm sorry, you are a professional, you also have to deliver on your tasks. You have to do a job, and it's not just for your own pleasure, you're there for the children, for the schools, and many people will understand it. I mean, if there is sort of this little bit of accountability. And to finish off is, for example, we were recently, the top example for us is really Finland. In Finland, you have 12% of all the candidates who apply for becoming teacher at the university actually get entry to the teaching profession because there's so much competition. So the number of those applying is so high. So there's something, and they are not paid particularly well there. It's something which is valued. And what I was very much impressed is when you go there, they have lots of support via an education agency. They have lots of support also on difficult issues, on teaching all types of children with different backgrounds, with things like drug abuse and anything that you have in society around it. But they take a lot of responsibility, saying, yes, I'm a professional, I'm here for the teaching, but I have to teach the children I have in front of me. And if these children come without knowing the Finnish language, if they come because their parents are poor, if their parents are alcoholics, I deal with it. I get support from the health services, from the social services, but they take responsibility of doing it. And that I was very much impressed that the teachers saw themselves as highly professional dealing with the children that they have. And as I said, on the basis of the surveys we have, it's actually what most of the teachers want. I mean, I think they need to be supported, but I think they are also, many of them, they are ready to get it and they're happy to do it if they get the support. So I would think it's also possible, if we want to recruit people to this profession, I think it's also important to give a positive message and to say that there are big challenges about, but it's all feasible to do it.
Dankjewel. Zijn er nog vragen? Ik zou zelf nog 1 vraag willen stellen, eigenlijk, om af te sluiten. Ik zou graag jullie opinie willen horen over iets. Zijn er landen dat jullie weten waar er een verschillend loon is, naar gelang wat je doet als leerkracht? Ik bedoel dat er een soort van een basisloon is, zal ik maar zeggen. En voor mensen die dan bijvoorbeeld coachen of ik zeg maar een 3-daagse trip organiseren naar Londen, whatever, dat die eigenlijk bovenop dat basisloon extra krijgen. Ik wil er wel de bedenking bij maken dat loon in Vlaanderen, denk ik, absoluut niet het grootste probleem is. Ik heb zelf lesgegeven en ik heb daar mijn collega's eigenlijk nooit over horen klagen. Maar wel zo dat op het eind, dat er wel wat frustratie zat bij leerkrachten, omdat op het einde van de maand staat er wel hetzelfde loon op uw rekening, terwijl sommigen natuurlijk veel meer hebben gedaan, alhoewel dat natuurlijk ook is uit heel wat, uit een passie natuurlijk ook. En omdat ze ook absoluut een uitdaging zochten, nog buiten het lesgeven. Maar dat zijn wel gemotiveerde, gepassioneerde leerkrachten die soms ook daardoor gefrustreerd raken. En ik heb er zo toch verschillende zien vertrekken naar de privé, omdat ze dat eigenlijk ergens wel een onrechtvaardigheid vonden. Ik pleit absoluut niet voor dat systeem. Ik sta er heel neutraal over, maar ik hoor het soms waaien en ik wilde eigenlijk daar nog graag jullie mening over kennen.
Yes, there certainly are examples. There are a few countries who have created a new level of teacher, called maybe a senior teacher or a lead teacher, which they do have extra responsibilities, and yes, they're looking to reflect that in salary. Sweden is an example that we have in our working group in the guide in the report, where they have also done that. There isn't evidence on the impact, and I think, as you said in your question, of course it's going to depend on how the individual feels about it as to whether that is a good thing to do, to have. Some countries, I think Poland is an example, they've just raised everyone's salary just a little bit to hopefully make everyone feel a little bit better. Now, whether that actually does solve all of the issues and make them feel like they're progressing and motivated and all of those things, again, the decision has been made, but we don't necessarily have the evidence where we could say, well, this was done and then this was the result. So I'm cautious about saying things about salaries. I know also it's a very tricky question because simply the budget may not be available, and it may be something that you just say, it's an interesting idea, but we can't, and that's when you have to look at. There are many other examples of recognising and rewarding the work that teachers and school leaders do, and I think that is where I think someone was asking about short-term actions, and I think that's where mapping and consultation, we have seen from Finland, Portugal, who admit that they didn't consult enough, and Croatia, who have recently consulted on change, have found that those have been the effective short-term actions, because what they have done is they have gone and they have said, exactly what would make a difference, and to take everyone with them in terms of the changes that they're making. And that's, for Croatia, that's been within the last year, and I think that's important to note. In terms of, yes, and in terms of feeling I suppose when you're looking at another teacher in another situation, and I think that's always going to be a tricky thing, and I think that's where you were saying, you were talking about schools in different contexts, and just if you make it more about the individual feeling valued and feeling that they are progressing, then the working group understand that that does so much. It doesn't solve everything, but it does so much to improve the situation, and hopefully that then reduces those other things that people look at, such as salary, as a particular way of saying how much teachers are valued compared to teachers in other countries, other sectors.
On salary, as you ask about it, there are differences in the entry salary, but there are also huge differences as to what the entry salary is comparable to what you may earn if you stay 30 or 40 years in the job. So there are countries where Lithuania is the worst one, where it's basically the increase is just a few percent, 3% between the starting teacher and if you stayed 30, 40 years. Which is an extreme. Denmark is very low, but actually, for example, in the Netherlands, you would earn the double at the end of your career as compared to your entry salary, on condition that you've done some training and additional responsibility. So in the Netherlands, for example, career progression is very much linked to getting new responsibilities. I don't think there is any country which gives an extra bonus if you go on a school trip with children. But if you are if you have a school leadership position, you're the subject coordinator for a particular subject, or you become the deputy headmaster or the headmaster. You are countries who are actually differentiating that quite importantly, and who also say pay rise only on condition of having also some professional development opportunities. So there are some countries, and the Netherlands is one of those.
Collega's, zijn er nog vragen? Dan rest mij nog om de sprekers te bedanken voor hun aanwezigheid hier en de uitgebreide antwoorden die we hier hebben gekregen. Dank u wel.